Welcome to Asia Pacific Defence Reporter, your go-to source for cutting-edge security insights in the region. Get ready for rapid-fire analysis and commentary from the Asia Pacific with your host, Kim Bergman.
Hello and welcome back. This is another podcast recorded from my hotel room, so if there are any random bangs and clanks in the background, that's what it is. After my previous podcast mentioning that I was in Germany, a few people indicated that they were looking forward to the next one so that I could tell them about what the TKMS bid for C3000 looks like. Sorry to disappoint. I can't do that because of the ridiculous secrecy rules imposed by Defence and supported by the government that I've referred to frequently. And before talking about what I am allowed to discuss, which relates almost entirely to the construction of the first three Australian frigates in the parent yard, I've done a bit more digging into this unprecedented secrecy, which is doing enormous damage because it's not only the prime contractors, it's Australian companies muzzled by the same thing. And I've done so because Defence Industry Minister Pat Conroy was adamant in his interview with me, which is in the current APDR, that this was not the case. He has been advised by the department that nothing has changed in the last 30 years, that it's all nonsense, that industry was free to talk with normal restrictions, and this was all one giant falsehood, and if anyone was complaining, it was all their own fault. Minister, if you are listening, the department is lying to you, and I'm going to explain why and how. The why is obvious. They don't want any scrutiny of how right royally they are screwing up this program. Let's go to the how. Okay, as many people know, there's a standard contracting format that you have to use in responding to defence tenders called AusDevCon, that companies have to fill out in laborious detail. Somewhere in there are confidentiality provisions. I don't think they should be there at all, or at least they need to be very heavily modified, but we can have that debate on another day. I say that, by the way, not just as a journalist, but as somebody who's spent a lot of time in industry. The department has presumably said to the minister, because there have been no changes to this part of AusDevCon in 30 years, industry is talking BS, and the problem is theirs, not yours. But what the sneaky bureaucrats have done, which presumably they are keeping the ministers in the dark about, is that for C3000 they have added in compulsory non-disclosure agreements with terrifying provisions such as jail time for any breaches, literally being put in the slammer for a few years if you even speak with your wife or your partner, let alone a pesky journalist, about C3000. There you have it. Officially, no change to AusDevCon. But then the probity lawyers in defence have got hold of this and gone, bingo, here's a great way of burying all of this so deep under legal threats that no one will figure out what we are doing until it's far too late. I'll make the observation that there's a role for lawyers, contract negotiations, for example, but they shouldn't be running the department the way they are. Kick them out so they can go back to defending tax cheats. All they are doing is gumming up the procurement process for no good reason and costing defence a fortune in fees into the bargain. I'll quickly canter through the visit to Germany because there's so much material to get through I can't do it in one episode. And I'll also write a detailed article or two, and those are the ones that will contain actual facts and figures rather than just me expressing opinions. The tour was a sort of North German naval shipyard tour. We landed at Hamburg, no time to check out the huge yards there, which I know quite well. Then it was off to the other great port city of Bremen, also Wilhelmshaven, to go on board a 7,000-ton F124 frigate, which was shortlisted for C5000, by the way, and we had a chance to speak with the officers. I hope to go more into that in future because they had a couple of important messages, including it's a good idea to standardize your combat management system across the surface fleet. Hold on to that thought. Then it was Bremerhaven, Kiel, and finally Wismar on the Baltic coast, where TKMS are making a $500 million investment in a shipyard that will double their conventional submarine production. Yes, you heard that. A second submarine production line to meet demand. They are so fully loaded with orders, if you wanted a diesel-electric submarine, you won't get delivery until the 2030s. And that's with 2 production lines. The one I saw in Kiel is a generation of anything else I have seen, and I wish I had more time to elaborate about that. Very quickly, and I do the company a disservice by being so brief, if selected, the Australian MECOs will be built by the Renner Group. If people want to look it up, it's R-O with an umlaut, N-N-E-R, also known, trading presumably, as Stahlbau Nord. This is a privately owned heavy engineering company that has been around for 42 years. They will do the Australian ships because they built the reference design, MECO 200, for Egypt. The hulls start their life in Bremen and are then barged to Bremerhaven for completion. Very roughly, ships of this size take in the high hundreds of thousands of man-hours to complete, and Renner has the people, the experience, the facilities to be able to take on the Australian work in a canter. They have no problem if Australia announces the winner at the end of this year. They can deliver the initial ship in the first half of 2029. Absolutely no problem. And it's important to point out at this point that that's the standard TKMS methodology. They are the designer and prime contractor, and they subcontract Renner for the actual build part rather than keeping it in-house. This is a purely commercial decision so that TKMS avoid the peaks and troughs of military shipbuilding projects. It's an arrangement that delivers warships on time and on cost. Right, that's the TKMS part of the podcast based on the visit. From here on, these are entirely my own views. Now, let's talk briefly about strategic relationships and the impact on C3000, because that is an area that Japan has been emphasizing and many Australian commentators are parroting. To the degree that there has been any analysis, it seems to have been quite shallow, pardon the nautical pun, but has led many observers to conclude that the Megami should be selected. Okay, but let's think about that just for a few seconds. If strategic partnerships depend on nations buying stuff from each other, like the Megami, shouldn't that be a two-way process? Shouldn't countries be buying things from Australia to strengthen the relationship as well as us buying things from them? It's surely a binary approach. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. Except in Australia's case, it can't happen because our industry base is so weak. After 30 years of slavish FMS purchases from the US, because our military defense bureaucrats and politicians, frankly speaking, have rarely been able to summon up enough energy or imagination to do anything else. The US buys almost nothing from us, and yet they are our number one strategic partner. The UK is comparatively even worse. We are spending tens of billions of dollars on the Hunter-class frigate program for the slowest naval acquisition in the Western world. Yes, they will be fine ASW platforms when they arrive, but the UK buys nothing from us in return. Now, let me say bluntly, because this is the reality, Japan also won't buy anything from Australia because they don't need to. Their own defence industry is huge, a reflection of the fact that they are the world's third largest economy. Germany, of course, is number 4. The idea that you can have strategic partnerships based just on buying stuff from another country seems shallow, and in any case, the relationship with Germany has involved things such as the export of 100 Rheinmetall Boxer 8x8 cavalry reconnaissance vehicles, to them. Remember, that was a year ago, with Ministers Miles and Conroy trumpeting it as the largest ever defence export in Australia's history. Or how about the strategic partnership announced in early June between TKMS and Saab to exploit joint opportunities to sell the combination of MECO ships and the Oz Combat Management System, previously 9LV, worldwide? By the way, the press release did not mention C-3000, but the media and various analysts have linked the two, and it's certainly correct, but it's a disgrace that the two companies are banned from saying so directly. What else? The German radar and electronics company Hensoldt has been active for years in Australia and has a very large footprint. Sonatec Atlas has been doing work in the underwater domain here for more than 30 years. Saab's 9LV is on Germany's upgraded F123 frigates, having won that contract 4 years ago. I could go on. But my aim isn't to run this as a commercial for Germany just because I've been there, but to try and inject some reality into the situation and explain, if you want strategic partnerships based on industrial cooperation, the reality is that Germany has done a lot. Certainly much more than the UK to date, and I think certainly more than Japan will ever achieve either. Now, the US is in a better position, but that's almost entirely due to the F-35 program, with Australian industry having exported more than $2 billion into that program via Lockheed Martin. Now, because the department, with the complicity of the government, has so totally muzzled TKMS on this project and everyone else, they have created a monster. This monster is that the Megami has to be selected because otherwise the strategic partnership with Japan will be imperiled. To me, this sounds like it's getting a bit blackmail-y. Is that the term? Blackmail light, maybe. Buy this ship or the relationship gets it. This is the way loud commentators in Australia are presenting it, not the Japanese government, which is more subtle. The argument is a bit contradictory, isn't it? The strategic partnership is really important to both countries, but if you don't buy our ship, we are going to downgrade it. Doesn't that suggest the strategic partnership was not especially important in the first place? At least the US has their lines right in all of this, and they go, our friendship is so strong and so deep, it doesn't matter what you buy, we will always be there for you, blah, blah, blah. Strategic partnerships are correctly based on things such as security treaties, not the purchase of equipment, and things like having common enemies. That used to be the case for NATO, but Donald Trump has just swung a wrecking ball through all of that by actively siding with Russia. So here's a bit more gratuitous advice for Ministers Miles and Conroy. If you have already selected the Megami, just stop this torture and announce it now. I also think some senior officers in the RAN have their thumb on the scales in this matter, and if I can do so legally, I'll have more to say about that in the future. However, if it's a genuine competition, then you had better get the department to yank all of those terrifying NDAs so that we can have an open and honest discussion in this country about what is going on. Right, I'm going to leave everyone with a final thought, but it's a big one and it's a very powerful one. If the MECO design is selected, there is no need for the first 3 ships to be built in Germany. They could all be constructed at Henderson by a company such as Civmec, which has all of the necessary infrastructure to do so. People might need to sit down and have another shot of vodka while I say this again slowly. There is no need for the first 3 ships to be built in a German parent yard. They could be done in Australia with the first in the water by the purely arbitrary deadline of 2029. You might be shocked to learn this, But this entire C3000 process was flawed from the beginning because of, frankly, a level of stupidity that has rarely, if ever, been seen in defence. It was kicked off with the Hilarides review, which concluded, amongst a whole lot of other things, this is just an example, that there wasn't enough time for companies to include the 9LV combat management system. Well, it turns out, yes, there was. It was offered as an option, not only by TKMS, but also Hyundai and Hanwha Ocean from South Korea. It might even have been offered by Navantia, whose ship was only on the short list by mistake, which was another howler. As for the first 3 ships in the parent yard, well, that strategy suits Japan, but it's definitely not the case for TKMS because their business model is different. As I've done my best to explain, they are the prime contractor. They do the design, they co-manage construction, and as they have amply demonstrated, they can build almost anywhere where they can get access to a good local partner and facilities, be that in Germany, Greece, Turkey, Egypt, or Australia. They demonstrated this 30 years ago with the Anzac frigate project. Now, apologies to the Renner Group, and 2 of the owners were there, very nice people. I'm sure that they would want the business of doing the Australian ships, but it's not necessary. If Ministers Conroy and Miles are really interested in Australian jobs and Australian prosperity and all of that sort of stuff, they need to have a look at the strategy that they've been talked into by the department. It is wrong. The first 3 can be done here. I can't be any clearer on that topic. I really hope that somebody in government actually looks at what's going on. Now, with an eye on the clock, another remarkable thing, and change of topic because I'm sure there are some listeners who couldn't care less about C3000, how about Ukraine's massive drone attack on Russia's strategic bomber fleet? Now, we'll be discussing the implications of that for years to come, just not in Australia. As I've done my best to explain in previous podcasts, I believe that the world, in terms of military technology, is shifting towards uncrewed robotic systems enabled by AI, and the pace of that is picking up, not slowing down. It has implications for all domains, air, land, and sea, and we just have to keep going back to how Ukraine, but also Russia, they're catching up, are using these technologies as disruptors. The idea that quadcopters are only relevant for short-range combat, that myth has been completely exploded. See what I did there? Completely exploded by the destruction of around 40 Russian long-range strategic aircraft, mainly bombers, but a couple of airborne early warning and control aircraft in there as well. It's been covered well by the newspapers, trucks driven unwittingly by Russians, presumably parked near air bases, the drones fly off. This is what's happening in 2025. Imagine what the situation is going to be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. It relates to things like nuclear-powered submarines, another hobby horse of mine. I think we are backing the wrong technology. I think we are wasting enormous amounts of time and money rather than looking at what can be done with far cheaper, far more numerous uncrewed systems. Okay, that's it for now. At the end of this episode, I'm going to take a short break. I'm attending a wedding in Greece, not my own, and so it's my intention to have a little bit over a week of leave. That probably leads to a 2-week break in podcasts. I will say, though, as always, if anything really, really urgent occurs, I'll put something together, even if it's a bit scrappy and at short notice. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye for now, and see you next time.
That's today's Asia Pacific Defence Reporter. For more in-depth articles, expert opinions and exclusive interviews, visit AsiaPacificDefenceReporter.com. Stay informed, stay ahead. This is your source for all things defence. Until next time.